morning, everyone. Give Troy a better round of applause than that, you're all. There we go.
Thank you.
So, did you all enjoy the conversation with Byron and Alan this morning? You're going to find this conversation equally as important. Troy is one of the top African American. No, let me take African American out. He's one of the top business people you will meet. He happens to be African American, and there's a difference between the two. And I would suggest that you all, in speaking with each other and talking about that, you lead off with being a top business person, not a person who's the top African American business people. But that said, all things are measured in numbers, and that's how this world works. That's how people are oftentimes measured, but that's not who it is you are. And I want to take a moment to take it back, because you didn't start off doing $1.2 billion in sales. Right. You're from, and I'm going to let you tell your story, but you're from Louisiana.
Correct.
I'm not going to call you a country boy, but I'm going to say you're a country boy from Louisiana. So tell us a little bit about your background and your history, where you don't have to take us back to the embryo stage, what Byron took us to, but where you were born and your growth or your growing up in Louisiana and what that meant with your family.
Sure. First and foremost, thank you for having me here today. It's an honor and a privilege to be here at the Black Enterprise Entrepreneurs Conference. Special occasion, and I feel very grateful to be up here and to have this conversation with you today. So thank you very much, and thank you for holding this conference. This is great, not only for African American owned businesses, but for businesses in general. So again, I'm honored and privileged to be here today. Yeah, I was born and raised in Louisiana, Lafayette, Louisiana. Grew up in a household that was surrounded by, I have an older sister, my mother. Unfortunately, I lost my father when I was 7. But we lived next door to maternal grandparents. So my grandfather was the father figure in our family. But I had my grandparents on my father's side as well. So grew up in a very tight-knit family where everybody pitched in to raise the kids. And my grandfather was sort of the strong hand in the family, teaching the values, making sure I understood what it meant to be a man, making sure I understood what it meant to take care of your family, to be a part of the community that would, a person in the community that would add value. So that's, I had a great childhood in Louisiana, obviously home filled with a lot of love and Coca-Cola products. And that's where I originally, I guess, the seed was sown, if you will, for me to have an interest in the Coca-Cola system. Didn't know it, I just enjoyed the products, but didn't know it, that obviously that I'd grow up and be in this position. Played basketball in high school, got a scholarship to play basketball in college, played at Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia, graduated in 1992 with a degree in finance and business law. And
share briefly, too, you were an outstanding high school basketball player.
Some may say that.
Well, at least that's what you put in your bio.
I don't know who wrote that,
no.
But I'll take it.
Okay.
I was okay.
You selected, and I think this also governs in many ways how you even run your business and do things today. But you selected your college on something that was unique.
Yeah.
You had other scholarship offers. But share with the audience why you ultimately, because you had never been, you're from Lafayette, Louisiana. You'd never been to West Virginia before.
Yep.
What made you decide to go to Marshall University in West Virginia?
Yeah, so, I was blessed that I had, quite a few opportunities to go to different schools. But I'd say the deciding factor for me to go to Marshall was the coach. And more importantly, I got a chance to play for a black coach, and that's something that I wanted to do. In terms of learning from him, not only on the basketball court, but what I thought I could learn off of the basketball court as well. And so there was a connectivity there. And it was nothing that I had against playing for a coach that was not African American or not black. I just thought it was a better situation for me as a young black man to be under the tutelage of an African American. So, I mean, if I list the top 2 things that drove me to Marshall, playing for a black coach was at the top of the list.
Very interesting. When you were at school, you weren't there just to play basketball?
No.
And I guess you either knew early on, as we were watching the NBA game last night, but you knew early on, you know what, there's probably a pretty good chance I won't be playing in the NBA.
Right.
I need to focus on something else. And you really did get something out of college. I mean, you went there for business. So talk about how you were able to maintain that focus. I know your grandparents had a lot of influence. Grandmother, I believe in particular, had a lot of influence on you. We're going to come back to faith in a minute, but had a lot of influence on you in regards to what you were going to do. You didn't just go through school, play 4 years, and walk out and didn't have a degree. You went there with a purpose.
Yep.
So talk about that for a moment in regards to your purpose.
And it was pretty simple for me. In the household that I grew up in, my grandmother was a teacher. Her sisters were teachers. My mother was educated. She worked for an oil and gas company, retired a few years ago from Halliburton. So my mother had a, professional career. But I grew up in a household where education was key. And it was like, it's okay to play basketball. And I knew it was a good ticket for me to go to school and for basketball to pay for me to go to school. But that wasn't the primary reason why I was going to college. I wanted to get a degree, and part of it was I wasn't, going to come home empty-handed. I wasn't going to come home with a basketball in my hand and in a bag. I was going to come home with a diploma. It was that simple for me. I was like, I'm not going home after 4.5 years, whatever it is, empty-handed, where people are walking out of here with degrees that propels them to, bigger and better things in life. I saw it. I understood what that meant. I saw it, in my community where, people had degrees. And I'm like, I'm not going home empty-handed. I'm going home with a degree. And furthermore, I wasn't going to let the NCAA system just use me up and not give something back to me. I was actually going to take it.
That is something, unfortunately, that more young men, especially young men of color, need to focus on, because you need to use the sport as much as the sport will use you.
Absolutely.
So to advance and get what you were going to get. But you also came out not just with a degree like, I was there in basket weaving.
Right.
You had a degree in finance,
Yep.
right? And you were focused on, so you didn't choose the simplest route to just go through. You chose something in finance that ultimately propelled you into your career. But what made you even select? Because I'm sure that there's pressure when you're in school to say, no, you don't need to take those kind of courses.
I'll give you a specific story on the pressure that I got when it came to choosing my major. So I knew I wanted to be in business, so I chose finance and business law. I was pretty good in math, so it was a fit. And I was interested in potentially going to law school, so the business law piece fit as well. But after I chose my major, I remember going to my first finance class, and it was taught by the head of the finance department at Marshall. And sat in the class, went through the first week, and at the end of the first week, the professor said, hey, I need to talk to you. Could you stop by my office so we can have a conversation? It's a true story. And I said, okay, sure. Go to his office, and he says, I want you to change your major. And I go, what is this about? And he said, I've had basketball player athletes come through here. They want to be in the business school. They want to major in finance, whole nine. You guys don't come to class. You never finish. You always change your major. Save yourself some time. Save me some time. Change your major. You won't get through this. And I said, no, I'll get through it. He said, no, I'm just, you can think about it over the weekend, but change your major. I want you to do that because it just doesn't happen. I said, okay, I'll think about it over the weekend. Of course I didn't think about it over the weekend. I was going to stay with my major. Make a long story short, by the time the semester ended, he was asking me to stop playing basketball and focus only on school because my grades were that well.
Good for you. You got out of college, and then you went and you got out of college and you went into business.
Yep.
Moved to Houston.
Yes.
So, and you had you don't have to go through it every year, but you had a long storied career working with Chase,
Yep.
oil and gas, business and finance. So talk a little bit about your transition from leaving Marshall and going back and moving to Houston, and your career in finance and Chase, and how, and we'll move into how that moved you into Coke, but what learned in that thing and why you chose and selected going into oil and gas and working in Chase and finance in particular.
Right. So coming out of college, well, this is how I really got into banking. This is the real story. My roommate and I were, last semester in school, we were going to, for the summer and for the fall semester, because I was going to graduate in December, we decided to rent a house. And we were going to stay in this house, and we kind of split and said, okay, you go and take care of these utilities, and I said, I'll go and take care of those. And I was going to take care of the phone and maybe the electricity. And one of the places that we could do that, or that I could go to get all that taken care of, was the bank, which was Bank One at the time in West Virginia. Go up there, talking to a young lady. She says, oh yeah, you played basketball up at the college. I said, yeah. I said, what are you doing? I said, oh, I need to turn on my electricity, the whole nine, and I'm going to summer school, then I'm going to graduate. And as we continue to talk, I said, oh, by the way, are you guys hiring? She said, maybe so. She said, go upstairs and see. I went upstairs and I actually filled out an application. I told the athletic director at Marshall what I had done, and he said, oh, I know the guy who's head of HR there. I'll give him a call. Within 2 weeks, I had a job. I was in banking. And I did the summer as well as the fall, and that propelled me into, banking. And that gave me my first taste of banking. I said, this is pretty good stuff. I want to be here. And plus, I was just learning a lot because I was dealing with different companies. Not one particular industry, but just different companies in different industries. So I joined Chemical Bank in their analyst training program, moved down to Houston. And anytime you're going to be in any type of business in Houston, you're going to touch energy. It's the energy capital of the world, so that's going to happen. So started doing oil and gas, chemicals, all those things. I was fortunate enough where they gave me the opportunity to say, okay, like in most investment banking groups, they say you could go back to school, get your master's degree, and come back. But I was fortunate enough that I did pretty well, that they offered me to become an associate 2 years into my tenure. So I didn't go back to grad school. I got promoted, and then I was a vice president in another 2.5, 3 years. So I did oil and gas, I did chemicals. At one point, I ran our middle market banking effort in the Dallas Metroplex, through East Texas, the whole nine. So did a number of things, including healthcare, telecom, some real estate. I did quite a few things. So it was a very fulfilling and interesting career where I got to see companies at different stages as well as across a number of industries.
So you were on a fast track, no question, in a corporate career.
Yes.
And had, you had the credentials, you were on a fast track, you were a young vice president, you moved on to more and more senior positions. And I suspect you could have stayed, right, and continued on that fast track into, maybe one day becoming a CEO, perhaps, of a publicly traded company. But something happened along the line where the entrepreneurial bug either was in you or you saw something that changed your life, something that you saw that said, wait a minute, I could continue to work for somebody and earn a good living and have a nice family and all the above, and we'll come back to that in a second too, but there was something that triggered it.
Yep.
So take us through what you saw, what made you decide, you know what, I could do that, right?
Yep.
And someone else would do, I could do that then made you become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, so a number of things happened, and it didn't happen when I was at JP Morgan Chase, the first time it happened to me. The first time I got that inclination, I was in high school. And so you take a kid that, when I went to a private high school, and I went there primarily to play basketball. It's just the truth. Pretty good private high school, had a lot of money, great basketball team, great facilities. I went there to play basketball. In the midst of that, I had started hanging around a different set of people, basically the white kids at the white high school. And I remember hanging out with them at their homes at times and meeting their parents. And, a lot of them had obviously parents who were, doing well at businesses that they worked for or doing well at businesses that they own. And I remember having conversations and saying, this is not a difficult conversation. They don't seem like they just are up here. Go home, the conversation is down there. It's the same type of conversation, and I can sit down and have. So I started to feel that. Why can't I do the things that they're doing? This was back in high school, and it popped up again when I was at J.P. Morgan Chase. I'm advising CEOs, CFOs. I'm advising business owners on what to do with their business, and they're relying upon me to do that, and I'm helping them finance their businesses, the whole nine. And I'm saying, wait a minute, I need to take some of my own advice because I could get on that side of the table. I'm smart enough to be over there. And it kind of reared its head again where I said, I can actually do that. And it came full circle. The first big deal I did in the Coke system was there was a family down in Miami, the De La Cruz family, that owned the Anheuser-Busch distributor. And I remember going down to Miami to talk to them and said, what do you guys want to do with your distributor, the whole nine? And they said, no, we want to be in the Coke business. This was about 95. And I said, yeah, you and everybody else. Hard to get in that business, obviously. About a month or two later, Bacardi, which owned the Puerto Rico, put it up for sale. So we were able to do a little matchmaking and bring them together. So I worked with them for about 2 years for them to acquire that business, which they still own down in Puerto Rico. Great family, smart people, but I did a lot of heavy lifting there where I said, no. I need to get on that side of the table. Business ownership, multi-generational wealth, I can do that. I can do that. And I said, I've met a lot of people in the black community that can actually do that, but we just needed to have the opportunity to get there. And fortunately, because of the relationships that I built, the Coca-Cola Company and the Coke system, over a number of years, the opportunity came along back in 2012 or 2013, whatever that was. But that's what the spark of it was just me saying, I can do that.
You were advising all of these people on how they could grow and build wealth for their families, for their activities, what have you, all throughout.
Yep.
And at some point, it triggered and said...
At some point, I started advising myself.
Right, you said, well, wait a minute now. I'm helping these people to be able to make millions of dollars. I'm still getting paid a salary. And I've advised them on how they can build, what have you. Then this happened in 2012, the opportunity.
Yep.
But I want to bring it back to faith for a moment because none of this happens, and faith's very important to you.
Absolutely.
And I think it has to be important to entrepreneurs because at some point, you're placing a bet on yourself. You have to have faith in yourself and belief in yourself, but faith in the system that you're going to be okay. So talk about the importance of the role that faith has played, before I get to the part of how you actually made that transaction, all the above, talk about the role that has played in your life. You're here, by the way, I would be remiss, his lovely wife Vonda's here as well, and I would be remiss if I didn't introduce her, but the role that faith has played in your life along the way, from the time you were a child all the way through, even today.
Sure. So I was in church, and basically two churches. Baptized as a Catholic, growing up in South Louisiana. Majority of South Louisiana is Catholic, but my grandmother was Methodist, so I was raised on both sides of that. And I was in church every weekend. So faith was instilled in me at a very early age. And plus, I went to even as a kid, I went to private Catholic school. In Louisiana, there are a lot of private Catholic schools, and there are quite a few black private Catholic schools, which were great from a faith standpoint, but great just from a standpoint of just an environment to be in. But my mother, my grandparents, and people in the neighborhood were all people of faith. And so that was instilled in me at a very early age. And as I grew up and understood it more, that became just, a rock, or the rock in my life, because I knew that through the grace of God and my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, anything was possible. So my faith always helped me keep my lows not too low, my highs not too high, always keeps me humble. It's something that is the center point for my family, my wife, my 2 kids. That's what we rally around as a family, our faith. It's the center point for my business, because what I'm basically doing is I'm a steward of the assets that God has given me. That's what I do. So faith is right at that center of what I do every day. And I know that everything that I've been able to accomplish is by the grace of God. And, it's very simple. If my philosophy on that is I pray like only God can do it, which is I get up from my knees and I work like only I can do it. And with that combination, things happen. Sometimes they happen fast, sometimes they happen slow, not like I want it, but always like God intends it. I'm fine.
Good for you. 2012, so
Oh, yeah.
you're making all of these, you're providing all of this advice to these other families, watching them in entrepreneurship, and then at some point during this, because you were not only advising the families, you're also advising Coca-Cola.
Yep,
too.
because I left J.P. Morgan in '02 and I started my own advisory investment company.
Right.
Yep.
So now you're an entrepreneur advising people, and this opportunity avails itself.
Yep.
But it's still a leap, right? It's
a big leap.
Right, it's a big leap. So because the rise from 2012 to where we are now is almost unprecedented.
Yep.
But let's talk about that time frame, in 2012, and when you made the transition from, your own advisory firm, your own shingle that you were hanging out, to I can get into this, and I'm going to get into this in a big way.
Well, it all started, I looked at other opportunities to get into the Coke bottling system. One most notable was to buy Coke Philly, Coca-Cola Bottling Company, which was owned by the late, great Bruce Llewellyn, who was the first black Coke bottler. He did that deal back in '85 with, people forget that, with Dr. J and Bill Cosby.
Yeah, right.
And Bruce owned that business until about 2005. I'm looking at CJ, it's about 2005 we're talking about. And so I had a chance to pursue that opportunity. Didn't work out, which was fine. But in 2000, the seminal moment was in 2010 when the Coca-Cola Company acquired their largest bottler's North American operations. Coca-Cola has owned 80% of the U.S. and a lot of stuff overseas. I think it was about a $30 billion corporation at the time. Excuse me, largest bottler in the world. Coke buys their North American operations in what was a $12 billion transaction. I was there because I was an advisor at the time to Coca-Cola Enterprises. CEO, CFO, General Counsel of Coca-Cola Enterprises. We brought in Credit Suisse and Lazard, did that deal in 2010. So I knew that the Coca-Cola Company was going to refranchise those operations at some point. So I stayed close. I had a lot of great mentors in the Coca-Cola system. Sandy Douglas, who was head of Coke North America, a good friend of mine, great mentor. Gary Fayard, who was CFO. Kathy Weiler, who's the current CFO. All people who helped shepherd me through this process, because you got to have those people who are mentors, who are friends, who are advisors that you can share your ideas and your thoughts, your dreams and desires with, that are in position to help. So those were just a number of the people that were there. And I knew that the Coca-Cola Company was going to refranchise this, and so I stayed close to it, saying, hey, remember, I'm interested, want to purchase, want to be in the bottling industry, because Coca-Cola bottlers are, some of the greatest entrepreneurial ventures, one of the greatest entrepreneurial ventures you could. Some of these bottlers have been in the hands of families for over 100 years. People kind of forget that. Great vehicle for multi-generational wealth, great vehicle for investing in communities because of what we do every day. We're in the communities, selling our products, doing our services every day. So they're great vehicles for that. And that was another attraction that I had, because I'm like, we got to figure out a way to turn some of this money to the black community as well, and the only way we do it is if we own the assets and control the business. So some of that community giving could be back in our own communities. But I was given the opportunity to come in and, long story short, to pitch where I wanted to be in the U.S. if I had a chance to buy a bottle. And it was 3 places that we chose. One of them was kind of forced on us. The other 2 was, okay, yeah, let's see where we want to be. And it was the Memphis area, which we blew out to St. Louis and, you know, a bigger part of sort of that southern Midwest. Florida and the Mid-Atlantic, D.C., Virginia, Maryland, the whole 9. You know something about that area from a beverage standpoint. Yes. So we had our eye on Florida, which is one of the gems in the Coke North American system and one of the gems in the Coke system from a bottling standpoint worldwide because of growth, sunshine, multicultural population, which drives consumerism. And it's, you know, 100 million tourists go there every year, so we have a big footprint to sell our beverages into. And there was a long line of people, including existing bottlers, that wanted the Florida territory. But we focused hard on it, made the pitch, did the research, and this is why it makes sense not only to create an independent bottler in Florida, but to create an independent black-owned bottler in Florida. So we used both angles. So we first went, this is why it makes sense operationally, market share, to do it. Oh, and from an African-American minority ownership standpoint, this is why it makes sense. Not a lot of people gave us a chance to win that.
And stay with this point, but Coke had not awarded a new bottling franchise in 60 years.
Yeah, none had
Black
been.
or white?
No, so some had changed hands, but no, there was not another bottler that had been stood up from the ground up, greenfield. No operations. You got to go in and buy, stand it up, get your payroll, get your, you know, back office services, put together your management team. It hadn't been done in 60 years.
Okay.
And we were fortunate enough to get the nod to do that, in part because we had built some really good relationships at the Coca-Cola Company, done some really good work, and we had some people that were in our corner, like Douglas, like Kathy Weiler, the whole 9. And we won that. We came out of nowhere, and we won the opportunity to acquire what was Central Florida at the time, sales and distribution. And we didn't have any operations in beverage or anything like that. Time we were putting together a management team. We probably had we closed the deal on May 29th, 2015. So May 30th was our first day of business. We just cycled 3 years. But we had put together a team. We had about 10 people. So May 29th, we have 10 people. May 30th, we have 1,200 people because we acquired these operations, had all these facilities, the whole 9. First black bottler in the system in all those years. Thank you. And it was a leap of faith for a lot of people because, you know, a lot of people, part of it was because we were black. Part of it because we were new to the system. People said, is this going to work? And we made it work. We stood it up, we grew it, we operated it well, and we operated it well enough to be granted the opportunity to acquire North Florida as well as South Florida, and we built a $1 billion company through expansion in 21 months. So by the time, thank you, by the time early 2017 rolled around, we had 4,600 employees and $1.2 billion in revenues. Now, I have to tell you, it wasn't always smooth because when we pitched to go into Florida, it wasn't even about Florida. When I pitched it, I said, I had the attitude of $1 billion or bust. And I told the people at the Coca-Cola Company that we were presenting to, I don't want to do this if we can't build a $1 billion business. If we are not afforded the opportunity to build a $1 billion business, I don't want to do it. Some people thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. Maybe I still am. Who knows? My wife thinks I am at times. But my point was, if you're talking about a $400 billion bottler in the Coke system, that was done in 1995 with Bruce Llewellyn. we had to progress. So my point was we had to be 3 times that at least. And it's like, in my mind frame, where I was coming from was, we as black entrepreneur business people, we have to start to focus on, and I was trying to lead the way, how do we build large businesses, billion-dollar plus businesses that employ a lot of people, that generate cash flow, generate multi-generational wealth, where we can employ more people in our community, where we can give back to our communities, and where we can start to continue to make the Black Enterprise list, but starts to make the Forbes largest privately owned company list, all those things, because we have a lot of black businesses. I think the issue is, or the opportunity is, how do we build large black businesses, institutions, around for 100, 200 years? I think for me, that's the game right now. And my point was, I was talking about it before, so if I'm going to talk about it, I'm going to be about it. So when I had the opportunity to be about it, I was like, $1 billion or nothing. That's where I wanted to go.
You and I have had a lot of conversation about, and I spoke about it earlier this morning, about scale, not access to capital. And the greatest inhibitor for our entrepreneurs that are sitting here today, despite the fact that people oftentimes is access to capital, and certainly you've been in the capital game, so you know that it actually is really not about that.
No.
In fact, in my conversation with Mark Cuban last night backstage, I said, I kept pushing this whole thing about scale. He said, listen, Butch, there is too much money that's out. In fact, there's too much capital out. It's actually chasing bad deals. Our challenge is not that. And what you and I have talked about, there's a couple of things. One is we can't ask people to do for us what we're not prepared to do for ourselves. And when I say that, I mean, if as a black-owned company, I'm not prepared to do business with other black-owned companies, that I can't sit there and look them in the face and say, you should be doing more.
That's right.
Right? And more oftentimes than not, what I find is we as both consumers as well as business people find ourselves not doing business with each other. I'm going to use the statistics. So in the Jewish community, the dollar turns over 6 times before it ever leaves. In the black community, it turns over less than 1/2, meaning as soon as it lands in our pocket, we can't wait to go and spend it somewhere else. And so we have to, as a business community, start within ourselves first to say, what are we going to do? Right? I use this 10-point quiz I use with folks when I speak all the time. I say, okay, many of you say you're about the supporting African-American business community. I said, so here's my 10-point quiz. Do you have a black doctor, lawyer, travel agent, auto dealer, florist? Name the service, name whatever it may be. Most people, if I even ask these people most people will not get 5 out of 10.
Yeah. No, that's right. I mean,
so if your child came home and said, guess what, Mom and Dad, I got a 60 on the test, you would go crazy.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
When it was time for when it's time for me to get a car, it was time for me to order another car. And so I do business with people who do business with us. It's just that simple, right? So the people you see here that are our sponsors and what have you, we do business with them because they're doing business with us. And you should, as an audience, pay close attention to who is in fact supporting an event like this, because those are the ones that are investing in you and doing business with those same people. So, and I told you this story, so when I was getting his car, one of our advertisers, well, not at the time, I'm still an advertiser, said, well, I'll help you to get an automobile. This was 5 or 10 years ago. And I said, well, we wanted to get the specific SUV that BMW made at this time that my kid, they're not kids, but 4 millennial children. And so I went over to get it, and so I went to go see the guy, and they were doing business with us. He said, oh, Mr. Graves is going to be great. We have a dealership not a mile and a half from your house. I said, great. I said, is it a black-owned dealership? And they looked like I was crazy. They said, no, it's not black-owned, but it's a mile and a half from your house. I said, well, where's the nearest black-owned one? And they said, he's in Pittsburgh. I said, let me have his phone number. So I called him up. I said, listen, I'm looking for whatever. And to his credit, he said, not a problem. I'll get it there. Yeah. Next, within 4 days, he drove the car on a not a flatbed, whatever those kind of things are. And I purchased the car through a black dealer. Now, I don't consider that being going to extraordinary lengths. No. It's just, it is self-preservation, frankly. So the question is, not question, what I'd like you to share is, what is it that we can do? Because you're right, it is about building businesses of size. 95% of African-American businesses today are sole proprietorships. Yep. Meaning all we're doing is employing ourselves. We have a shingle outside that says I'm a consultant and I employ myself. How can we get to business? And what is it you're doing specifically to do business with minority-owned businesses, other minority-owned businesses like yourself?
So I'll point out, I think, three things that are applicable. One, I'll talk about the Coke system. So I wasn't happy with just saying, okay, now we have another Coke bottler that's black in the Coke system. I sat down with Sandy Douglas and other people at the Coca-Cola company and said, we could and should do more. And they said, agreed. Why don't you help us do more? Make a long story short, we also, I'm ecstatic, I'm proud. We have not enough, but we have 2 black bottlers in the Coke system now. The other one is Junior Bridgman, who owns a bottler that's based in Kansas City, and Junior he's probably in the top 10 in terms of bottler size. Yeah. Yep, because he owns a bunch of Wendy's. Great basketball player, but great entrepreneur. Junior does an awesome job. I learn a lot from Junior, every time I talk to him. So I pushed to make sure and also help to say, how can we do this? And so I played a small role in helping to bring Junior Bridgman into the system, more than an introduction, and making sure they knew who he was, because he stood on his own 2 feet in terms of his business acumen and ability to do this. But it was a point where he said, no, we can and should do more, and I like to think I used my position to help move that forward. So that's one thing. How do we encourage and bring other African people to do business, with corporations from an entrepreneurial standpoint and recommend them and help them get there? The other piece is what I call your service providers. So I'll give hopefully nobody from, well, it doesn't matter. If somebody's from J.P. Morgan is in here today, that's okay. So me being an Oregon, alum, J.P. Morgan led our first credit facility. $80 million credit facility, we increased it to $100 million in 2015. They did a really good job on the key things, a not so good job on building a relationship, and I think part of it was because they didn't have anybody across the table that looked like me, and I told them about that. I said, you guys got to put some black people on this team. I was direct about it. So, and I look at that not only with my bankers, with my lawyers, my accountants, like, okay, maybe I use EY, but I want to see some black people on the team. I'd love to see them leading the team, but you got to put at least some black people on the team. So I was, I cut my teeth at J.P. Morgan. Long story short, I fired J.P. Morgan as our agent and went to Citi because of Ray McGuire, great brother. And Ray McGuire, I sat with Ray McGuire in his office in New York, say, Ray, this is what we need. This is how we need to structure the whole nine. I want you to be a lead. I know that's not what you do. Our business is nice, but this is small potatoes for Ray. Ray does a lot of big things. But Ray was smart enough because he knew he put a sister on the deal. And it's like, you gotta show some connectivity with me. Not to say that people of other ethnicities can't do business with me. That's not true. But at least show some type of respect, some type of connection, because we know other ethnic people do the same thing. They want to see people across, so we have to make those demands as well. And we should not be bashful about it. Thing is, okay, your vendors. One of our vendors that we used, and Rodney Monroe, who you know, he was a Charlotte police chief, and then he was our head of security. And Rodney led this charge. When he was our head of security, he hired to install cameras and security systems in all of our facilities. Black firm. Unfortunately, man, they were teetering. They were just trying to get through it.